Hello and welcome to another Magic the Gathering draft video. It's Al here with you, and this is How to Draft MTG. Today we're looking at my Murders at Karlov Manor draft guide. So let's get right into it. Please click like, leave a comment, and click subscribe if you want to help support the channel. It does a huge amount. Always love to hear your questions and your feedback in the comment section below, so don't be shy. I'm going to start by talking about what is draft. A little basics here for you. Draft is a limited format, meaning you don't need to bring your own cards. There are 8 players at the table. Each player has 3 packs. You take a card from the pack, pass it, and repeat until all the cards are gone. Then you build a 40-card deck to compete with the other drafters. MTG Arena offers Premier Draft, which is best of 1 and is also ranked, and Traditional Draft, which is best of 3 and is not ranked. Start with the main set mechanic here. This is Disguise. A card with Disguise can be played for 3 mana as a face-down 2/2 creature with Ward 2. It can be flipped up at any time for its Disguise cost. Like the Morph ability of years past, the flip happens immediately and cannot be responded to. After the creature has flipped, however, it will no longer have Ward 2 and could become more vulnerable to removal. Creatures with a Disguise cost of less than 5 mana cannot beat another 2/2 in combat, meaning attacking and blocking with disguised creatures is relatively safe. But beware if your opponent has 5 or more mana available, as their disguised creature could flip into something huge and eat yours. Next, we'll talk about a new card type, Case. Cases are a new type of enchantment that upgrade when certain conditions are met. This is known as the case becoming solved. These conditions are checked on your end step, and your opponent will have an opportunity to interact before resolution. Once solved, the case still retains its initial abilities. We'll talk about the color pair archetypes. Our 40-card deck at the end of the draft should follow one of these archetypes. Each archetype has a signpost uncommon, which helps to define its game plan, and additional multicolor cards to go with it. Many of the archetypes focus on set-specific mechanics. I've grouped the archetypes into tiers here, with tier 1 being the most powerful and easiest to come together at common and uncommon, Tier 2 being slightly less powerful, and Tier 3 being draft with caution, meaning there's maybe not a lot of support for these decks at common and uncommon. You might need some rares to really make you want to draft these. Starting in Tier 1, we've got Blue-White Detectives. Our signpost uncommon is Private Eye. This is 1 white-blue for a 3/3 Homunculus Detective. It says other detectives you control get +1/+1. And whenever you draw your second card each turn, target detective can't be blocked this turn. We also have No More Lies, which doesn't really fit into the deck necessarily, but is decent. It's white-blue for an instant. Counter target spell unless its controller pays 3. If that spell is countered this way, exile it instead of putting it into the graveyard. And we also have Granite Witness at common. Each color pair has its own common multicolor disguise card. This one is 2 white-blue for a 3/2 Gargoyle Detective with flying and vigilance. It's got Disguise for hybrid white-blue, so you can pay 2 times hybrid white-blue to flip it up at any time once it's disguised. And when it is turned face up, you may tap or untap target creature. Blue-White Detectives is a tempo aggro deck built around the detective creature type. Include as many detectives as you can, and look for cards that benefit detectives or get better when you have them. Next is Blue-Red Artifacts. Our signpost uncommon is Gleaming Gear Drake. This is blue-red for a 1/1 Drake with flying. When it enters the battlefield, we investigate, which means you create a clue token. It's an artifact with pay 2 mana and sacrifice it to draw a card. Whenever you sacrifice an artifact, put a +1/+1 counter on Gleaming Gear Drake. We also have Detective's Satchel, 2 blue-red for an artifact. When it enters the battlefield, investigate twice, so we get 2 clue tokens. We can tap it to create a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying. Activate only if you've sacrificed an artifact this turn. And at common, we have Gadget Technician, 2 blue-red for a 3/2 Goblin Artificer. When it enters the battlefield or is turned face up, create a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying. Its disguise cost is hybrid blue-red, hybrid blue-red. Blue-red artifacts is a mid-range deck that values sacrificing artifacts. Look for cards that care about a high artifact count, cards that create clue tokens, and cards that allow you to sacrifice artifacts. Next is Black-red Suspects. Black-red Suspects is an aggro deck that utilizes the new Suspect mechanic. If a creature is suspected, it has menace and can't block. Any number of creatures can be suspected at the same time. You will most often want to suspect your own creatures for the evasion that menace provides, but occasionally it will be beneficial to suspect an opponent's creature, making it unable to block. We've got a signpost uncommon here, Rune Brand Juggler. Black-red for a 2/2 human shaman. When it enters the battlefield, suspect up to one target creature you control, and we can pay 3 black-red and sacrifice a suspected creature to give target creature -5/-5 until end of turn. We also have a really nice removal spell here, and Deadly Complication, 1 black-red for a sorcery. Choose one or both, destroy target creature, and or put a +1/+1 counter on target suspected creature you control. You may have it become no longer suspected. And at common, we've got Shady Informant, 3 black-red for a 4/2 Ogre Rogue. When it dies, it deals 2 damage to any target, and it's got a disguise cost of 2 hybrid black-red, hybrid black-red. So this is an aggressive deck that wants to play lots of cheap creatures, and we want to look for cards that grant suspected status and cards that care about having suspected creatures. Black-red, as usual, gets to lean on black and red's excellent removal suite, making it a top-tier archetype. Next is White-red Battalion. Got a signpost uncommon here, Meddling Youths, 3 red-white for a 4/5 human detective with haste. Whenever you attack with 3 or more creatures, investigate. We've also got Lightning Helix, one of the greats of all time. Red-white for an instant, deals 3 damage to any target, you gain 3 life. And at common, we've got Dog Walker, red-white for a 3/1 human citizen with vigilance. It's got a disguise cost of hybrid red-white, hybrid red-white. And when it is turned face up, create 2 tapped 1/1 white dog creature tokens. White-red Battalion is an aggro deck that cares about attacking with 3 or more creatures at once. Look for cards that make multiple creatures and cards with haste that can be your 3rd attacker right away. Getting into tier 2 now, these are decks that aren't quite as powerful as the top tier decks and maybe not quite as easy to draft and put together, but you're still happy to draft them and they should perform pretty well. Firstly, we have white-black 2 power. Signpost uncommon, Wisp Drinker Vampire. 2 white-black for a 2/4 flying vampire rogue. Whenever another creature with power 2 or less enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. It also has an activated ability. 5 white-black. Creatures you control with power 2 or less gain Death Touch and Lifelink until end of turn. We also have Soul Search, which doesn't really fit with the theme, but it's black-white for a sorcery. Look at the opponent's hand, take a card. If it was a 1 mana value or less card, you get a 1/1 flying token. Not a very good card. I don't recommend picking it highly, but here it is anyways. And we've got Sanguine Savior, common. 1 white-black for a 2/1 vampire cleric. It has flying and lifelink. Disguise cost of hybrid white-black, hybrid white-black. When it's turned face up, another target creature you control gains lifelink until end of turn. Black-white is an aggro deck that cares about creatures with power 2 or less. Look for cards that make multiple small creatures and cards that benefit them or benefit from them. This looks like a worse version of white-red to me and a little less supported, so I'm putting it in tier 2. Next is white-green Go Wide Disguise. Our signpost uncommon is Sumala Sentry. Green-white for a 1/3 elf archer with reach. Whenever a face-down permanent you control is turned face up, put a +1/+1 counter on it and a +1/+1 counter on Sumala Sentry. We also have Buried in the Garden, 2 green-white for an enchant land. When it enters the battlefield, exile target non-land permanent you don't control until Buried in the Garden leaves the battlefield. Whenever enchanted land is tapped for mana, its controller adds an additional mana of any color. So a really nice removal spell that also gives some ramp and fixing. And at common, we have Crowd Control Warden, 3 green-white for a 4/4 Centaur Soldier. As it enters the battlefield or is turned face up, put X +1/+1 counters on it, where X is the number of other creatures you control. And it has Disguise for 3 hybrid green white, hybrid green white. White green is a go wide aggro deck that has synergy with the disguise mechanic. Look for cards that make multiple creatures, cards with disguise, and cards that get better when you have a lot of creatures. A lackluster removal suite has this in tier 2, but the deck should function well. Next is blue-green collect evidence. Blue-green is a value control deck that benefits from the collect evidence mechanic. Cards that collect evidence ask you to exile any number of cards from your graveyard with a certain minimum total mana value. Note that if you cannot meet this minimum, you don't get to exile any cards. Our signpost uncommon is Evidence Examiner. It says green-blue for a 2/2 Merfolk Detective. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you may collect evidence 4. So exile cards with total mana value 4 or greater from your graveyard. When you collect evidence, investigate. We also have Repulsive Mutation, which is just a solid card here. This is X green-blue for an instant. Put X +1/+1 counters on target creature you control, then counter up to 1 target spell unless its controller pays mana equal to the greatest power among creatures you control. Just be careful not to get blown out by removal on this one. And then at common, we have Undercover Crocodelph. This is 4 green-blue for a 5/5 elf crocodile detective. And whenever it deals combat damage to a player, investigate. Has disguise for 3, hybrid green-blue, hybrid green-blue. With green-blue, we're looking for cards that collect evidence and cards that trigger when you do. Cards with high mana values that are easy to get into the graveyard will help fuel your evidence collection. Note that the split cards, such as Flotsam, Jetsam here, are worth the total mana value of both sides while in the graveyard. Blue-green will be a bit more challenging to draft and build and may need to splash for removal, so I have it in tier 2. All right, getting into tier 3 now. These are decks that are a little bit less supported than tier 2 and perhaps are strategies that don't seem as strong to me. But if you get some really good rares early on in the draft or get a ton of uncommons that work really well together, then it's still worth drafting these archetypes. We'll start with Red-Green Disguise, our signpost uncommon. Tin Street Gossip, 2 red-green for a 4/4 Viashino Advisor with Vigilance. And it taps to add a red and a green. Spend this mana only to cast face-down spells or to turn creatures face up. We also have Breakout, which I don't believe is a very good card. Part of why this is in tier 3 is one of its uncommons is pretty bad here. This is 2 mana. Look at the top 6. Put a creature in your hand. If it costs less than 2 mana or less, you get to put it straight into play. So not really on plan with this strategy. And then we've got Rift Burst Hellion at common, 5 red-green for a 6/7 Hellion with Reach, and it has Disguise for 4 hybrid red-green, hybrid red-green. Red-green Disguise wants to accelerate mana to flip up some big Disguise creatures. Look for cards that make mana, big Disguise creatures, and cards that gain a bonus when Disguise creatures are flipped up. This type of strategy tends to be vulnerable to removal and to drawing the wrong pieces at the wrong time. I've put it in tier 3, but the right rares will make it worthwhile. Next is Blue-Black Clues Control. Our sidepost uncommon is Curious Cadaver. This is 2 blue-black for a 3/1 flying zombie detective. Whenever you sacrifice a clue, return Curious Cadaver from your graveyard to your hand. We also have an excellent removal interaction spell here, Coerced to Kill. This is 3 blue-black for an enchantment, Aura, enchant creature. It says, you control enchanted creature. An enchanted creature has base power and toughness, 1/1, has death touch, and is an assassin in addition to its other types. So these type of effects where you get to steal your opponent's best creature are really effective, and then you don't get to have its full power on your side, but a 1/1 death touch is really nice, and any other abilities it may have, you still have. So really, really powerful card here. And we've also got Fairy Snoop, which I think is amongst the best of these multicolor common disguise creatures. It's 1 blue-black for a 1/4 fairy detective with flying. It's got Disguise for 1 and a hybrid blue-black and another hybrid blue-black, so 3 in total. When it's turn faced up, look at the top 2 cards of your library, put 1 into your hand and the other into your graveyard. So while I don't think this deck is super well supported, these 2 cards in particular, Fairy Snoop and Coerced to Kill, I think will make it pretty attractive to draft. But as we'll see, it's not all that deep. Blue-black clues control wants to leverage value from clue tokens to take over the late game. Look for ways to trade resources with your opponent early, cards that make clues, and cards that can use those clues to close out the game. This deck doesn't have very good defensive options for the early game, aside from that fairy that we just saw, and it feels a little under-supported, so I'm starting it in Tier 3. And finally, we have black-green Graveyard-Midrange. This is a mid-range deck that uses the graveyard as an extra resource. Our signpost uncommon is Insidious Roots. Black-green for an enchantment. It says creature tokens you control have tap to add 1 mana of any color. And whenever one or more creature cards leave your graveyard, create a 0/1 plant creature token, then put a +1/+1 counter on each plant you control. We also have Crawl Whipcracker, which isn't really on plan, but is just a good rate creature. It's black-green for a 3/2 insect assassin with reach. When it enters the battlefield, destroy target token an opponent controls. So good in the early game and has a little extra utility later on. We also have Rakish Scoundrel at common. 2 black-green for a 3/3 elf rogue. It has Death Touch. When it enters the battlefield or is turned face up, target creature gains indestructible until end of turn. And it has Disguise for 4 hybrid black-green, hybrid black-green. So we're looking for cards that self-mill, cards that collect evidence, and cards that return creatures from the graveyard to your hand. Insidious Roots looks like a really cool build around, but without a lot of collect evidence cards in black and green, it may be tough to support. This deck will likely be less powerful and harder to build than the other archetypes. And one bonus archetype here, not sure what tier to put it in just yet, but we're going to talk about Multicolour Green. Green has some really nice mana fixing options at common, such as Nervous Gardener here, 2 mana 2/2, disguises for a single green, and when it's flipped up, you get to search for a land, put it in your hand. And they went this way, 2 and a green sorcery, search for basic land, put it into play tapped, and you get to investigate as well. There's a few other good mana fixing cards in the set, and then we have this build around Case of the Shattered Pact, 2 colorless mana for a case. When it enters the battlefield, search for a basic land, put it into your hand. To solve, there are 5 colors among permanents you control, which is going to be a little bit easier than it looks to assemble with the multicolor hybrid cost disguise common creatures that we've seen. And once it's solved, at the beginning of combat on your turn, target creature you control gains flying, double strike, and vigilance until end of turn. So this has the potential to be really powerful, even if you're not going for Case of the Shattered Pact. Green's got some really nice mana fixing options at common, allowing base green decks to splash for bombs or removal quite easily. Just be prepared to survive the early turns. So just to review here, we've got our color pair archetypes, tier 1 being the most powerful. We had white-blue, black-red, blue-red, and white-red. In tier 2, a little bit less powerful, but still quite good. We had white-green, white-black, and blue-green. And then tier 3, draft with caution. Unless you've got some really good rares or really good uncommons, maybe steer clear of these ones. Red-green, black-green, and blue-black. Now, these tiers are more than likely to move around, as this is super early and I haven't even played with the set yet. So if you've got a different idea what the tiers might be, that's totally cool. Go with that. But what you can do is you can use these tiers to sort of influence your preferences while drafting. So in this case, we see that red has 3 tier 1 decks, in my opinion. So red would be a really good place to start, whereas green has no tier 1 decks and 2 tier 3 decks, so we probably wouldn't want to start in green if these tiers are to be believed as being true. And also, white and blue look like pretty good places to start as well. So hopefully that helps. We'll go to our pick order now. We're going to start with the bomb rares. These are the A level cards. If it looks good, it probably is good. Generally speaking, the best rares are powerful, 1 color, and don't cost more than 6 mana. So examples here are Aurelia's Vindicator, Incinerator of the Guilty, and Rakdos, Patron of Chaos. There's plenty more good rares in the set. I won't go over them all right now, but just to give you an idea, past those, we're looking for Bees. These are our top uncommons and commons in the set. These have a high power level, are efficient, colorless or 1 color, fit in multiple archetypes, or are the best of the signpost uncommons that we've already looked at. These include the set's premium removal. So starting with white here, we've got Case File Auditor as a build around for decks that have cases, 3 mana 1/4. Look at the top 6, get a case, and anytime you solve a case, you get to do that again. Case of the Gateway Express, as a powerful removal spell for the go wide decks. When it comes in, each creature you control deals 1 damage to a creature of the opponent. If you attack with 3 more creatures, it gets solved, and then once it's solved, creatures you control get +1/+0. We also have Case of the Pilfered Proof as a build around for detectives. This is 2 mana for a case. Whenever a detective enters the battlefield or is turn faced up, put a +1/+1 counter on it. It's solved when you control 3 or more detectives, and once it's solved, if 1 or more tokens would be created under your control, those tokens plus a additional clue token are created instead. At common, we've got Novice Inspector, single white for a 1/2. When it enters the battlefield, investigate. Real nice. Inside Source, 2 and a white for a 1/1. When it enters the battlefield, you get a 2/2 detective token, and it can pay 3 and tap to give target detective you control +2/+0 and vigilance. And we have the removal spell Makeshift Binding. 2 and a white for an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, exile target creature an opponent controls. Until this leaves the battlefield, you gain 2 life. So white's got some really nice commons at the B level. For blue, we've got at uncommon Case of the Filched Falcon. This is single blue for a case. When it enters the battlefield, investigate. It's solved if you control 3 or more artifacts, and once it's solved, you can pay 2 and a blue to sacrifice it to put 4 +1/+1 counters on target non-creature artifact and make it a bird with flying. So this is a nice build around for the artifact style decks. We've also got another nice build around for collecting evidence. This is Surveillance Monitor, 3 and a blue for a 3/3. When it enters the battlefield, you may collect evidence 4. And whenever you collect evidence, you get a 1/1 Thopter with flying. We also have Furtive Courier, just a good rate card here. 2 and a blue for a 3/2. Can't be blocked as long as you've sacrificed an artifact. Whenever it attacks, you get to draw a card and discard a card. It's a real nice one there. And we've also got Mistway Spy, single blue for a 1/1 with Disguise 1 and a blue. When it's turn face up, till end of turn, whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you get to investigate. We've got Exit Specialist, 1 and a blue for a 2/1 detective. Can't be blocked except by creatures with power 3 or greater. It disguises for 1 and a blue, and when it's turn faced up, you get to bounce a creature to its owner's hand. And we also have Eliminate the Impossible, 1 and a blue for an instant. You investigate, then creatures your opponents control get -2/-0 until end of turn, and they lose Suspected. So just some powerful cards there, but no commons for blue for me that are in the B range. For black, we've got at uncommon Case of the Gorgon's Kiss, single black for a case. When it enters the battlefield, destroy up to 1 target creature that was dealt damage this turn. To solve, 3 or more creatures were put in graveyards from anywhere this turn. So if you had a creature trade with one of their creatures, and maybe they got to eat one of your creatures in combat, and you played this, killed that creature that ate your creature, that's 3 right there. So not too hard to get this to be solved right away. And once it's solved, it's a 4/4 Gorgon creature with Death Touch and Lifelink. We also have Undercity Eliminator, 3 black for a 3/3. When it enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice an artifact or creature. When you do, exile target creature and opponent controls. It's really powerful. And Persuasive Interrogators as a build around for the blue-black control decks, 4 black for a 5/6. When it enters, you investigate. And whenever you sacrifice a clue, target opponent gets 2 poison counters. So once they have 10 poison counters, they lose the game. So really, really powerful if you've got a lot of clues and a stable board state. We also have Leering Onlooker, 1 and a black for a 1/3 vampire with flying. And you can pay 2 black and exile it from your graveyard to get 2 1/1 bat creatures with flying. They come in tapped. So just really good rate. Really nice 2-drop. If you mill over it, it's good value. Fester Leech, single black for a 1/1. When it deals combat damage to a player, you mill 2 cards, and you can pay 1 and a black to give it +2/+2. So just an early threat that scales into the late game and helps with your self-mill stuff, collecting evidence, all that. Clandestine Meddler, this is a build-around or synergy card for the red-black Suspect deck. This is 2 and a black. For 3/2, when it enters the battlefield, suspect up to 1 other target creature you control. And whenever 1 or more suspected creatures you control attack, surveil 1. Finally, we've got Long Goodbye for black here in uncommon. Can't be countered, costs 1 and a black, and it destroys a creature or planeswalker with mana value 3 or less. Just really good rate. You can get rid of those disguised creatures without having to pay ward. No commons, again, in black's B range for me as well. Which is part of the reason why I think that black-blue deck is going to be in tier 3, just not as easy to get the good cards for it. In red at uncommon, we've got Case of the Burning Masks, 1 red. When it enters the battlefield, deals 3 damage to a creature. To solve, 3 or more sources you controlled dealt damage this turn. That includes just creatures of yours bumping into opponent's creatures or just hitting them. So this is really easy. You play this, attack with your 2 creatures, and then once it's solved, you can sacrifice it to exile the top 3 cards of your library, choose one of them, and play it that turn. So really, really powerful. Cornered Crook is 4 and a red for a 5/4. When it enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice an artifact. When you do, it deals 3 damage to any target. Go to the opponent's face, too, if you want. Concealed Weapon is 1 and a red for an artifact equipment. Gives equipped creature +3/+0. It disguises, so it can be played as a creature, and then flip for 2 and a red. And when it's turned face up, it gets to attach to a creature you control right away. It equips for 1 and a red. So there's a lot of stats. Any creature that you have running around a 1/1 or a 2/1 or whatever just becomes a huge problem for your opponent. And we also have Torch the Witness, X and a red for sorcery, deals twice X damage to target creature. And if you get excess damage, you get to investigate. So just really powerful removal spell, good value. Frantic Scapegoat, 1 red mana for a 1/1 haste. Comes in suspected, and when 1 or more other creatures enter the battlefield under your control, if Frantic Scapegoat is suspected, you can move that suspect status to another creature. Reckless Detective, 1 and a red for a 0/3, but whenever it attacks, you may sacrifice an artifact or discard a card, and if you do, you draw a card, and it gets +2/+0. So it's a 2 mana, 2/3 attacker that lets you rummage every turn. That's very, very powerful, and if you've got clues, lets you sacrifice them for free, which is really nice. And our last uncommon here for red, Convenient Target. This is for the aggro Suspect style decks. This is a single red mana for an enchantment. Aura enchants a creature, and it suspects that creature and gives it +1/+1, and then you can return it from your graveyard to your hand. So a little bit of late game potential there as well. And then at common, we've got 2 really nice removal spells. We've got Shock, single red, 2 to any target, and Galvanize, 1 and a red for 3 damage to target creature. And if you've drawn 2 or more cards this turn, so if you've sacrificed a clue, it deals 5 damage to that creature instead. So huge value there at common for red. Red looking like the best color by a mile to me because of all this depth at uncommon and common. Moving to green. At uncommon, we've got a build around here. Chalk Outline is 3 and a green for an enchantment. Whenever 1 or more creature cards leave your graveyard, create a 2/2 white and blue detective creature token and then investigate. So you also get a clue. So just a build around for the collect evidence decks. Hard-hitting question, really good removal spell, single green, sorcery. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature you don't control. So not a fight, but a bite, as they say in the biz here, for only 1 mana. And then we've got Green Belt Radicals, a 4 mana 4/4 with Disguise, 5 green. When it's turned faced up, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control, and they gain trample until end of turn. So good on rate as a 4 mana 4/4, and then if you get to flip it up, you're doing some serious business to your opponent there. Still at uncommon, Culvert Ambusher, 3 green for a 4/5. It's got Disguise for 4 and a green. When it enters or is turned face up, target creature blocks this turn if able, so you can set up a nice favorable combat for yourself there and take out one of your opponent's creatures. And finally at common, we've got Nervous Gardener, 1 and a green for a 2/2 with Disguise, single green. When it's flipped up, you get to search for a land. Next are our multicolor cards here. Lightning Helix, really great one. Red-white for an instant, deals 3 damage to any target, you gain 3. Buried in the Garden, 2 green-white. Enchant land. When it comes in, you exile one of their creatures, and when the land is tapped for mana, you get an additional mana of any color. Really nice. And then this group of hybrid split cards, not necessarily for power level, but just for flexibility. They can go in a lot of different decks. We've got Push and Pull, Hustle and Bustle, and Fuss and Bother. I won't read all of them right now, but very flexible, good early picks. And then we've got our good signpost uncommons that we're looking for. We've got Wisp Drinker Vampire, the black-white power 2 or less signpost, Rune Brand Juggler, the black-red suspect one, and Private Eye, the white-blue detectives signpost. We also have Meddling Youths, the red-white Deadly Complication. This is the black-red removal spell, and Coerce to kill the blue-black. Steal their creature, it becomes a 1/1 death touch. Finally, we've got Case of the Shattered Pack. We already talked about as our multicolor build-around. I think this is going to be a good early pick to start your draft with. Okay, so to review our pick order, we had our A's, our bomb rares, we had our B's that we just discussed, and then past that, we're looking to pick up the rest of the signpost uncommons that we talked about earlier to sort of start to define our archetype, and from there, we're looking for our C level cards. These are filler cards that fit with the archetype that we think we're drafting, and then our D's at the end of the packs. Hopefully don't have to play too many of them, but sometimes you'll play 1 or 2 in your deck. All right, and we'll quickly go over the combat tricks. These are the good combat tricks at common that you should be on the lookout for in-game. These tend to overperform in the 17lands.com data, but don't need to be picked as highly as some other cards since most decks don't need more than 2 or 3 combat tricks. So we'll just look at these real quick. Auspicious Arrival is 1 and a white. Instant, +2/+2 and Investigate. Fanatical Strengths, 1 and a green instant, +3/+3 and Trample. Felonious Rage is single red instant, +2/+0 haste, and when the creature dies, you get a 2/2 detective. On the Job, 2 white instant creatures you control get +2/+1 until end of turn, and you investigate. So this is the big one for the white green and white red go wide decks. They're all going to want at least one copy of these. Presumed Dead, 1 and a black instant, +2/+0. When the creature dies, return it to the battlefield and suspect it. And the Chase is on, 2 and a red instant, +3/+0 first strike and investigate. So now we'll talk about draft strategy. Having done our pick order in picks 1 through 3, we're going to try to take the best card we see, monocolored if possible. Picks 4 through 8, we're going to continue to take the best card we see, kind of regardless of color, but we're going to start to read signals, which means we're going to start to form a picture of what's being passed to us. If we see a few good red cards, 4th, 5th, 6th pick, we might say to ourselves, okay, red is open. Make a note of that. Try to stay red so that in pack 3 we get some more red cards. Picks 9 through 14 is known as the wheel. This means that the pack has gone all the way around the table, and these are the cards that are left. So if there are a lot of playable cards in one color through 9 through 14, it's possible no one else at the table is drafting that color, and we should strongly consider moving in. By the end of pack 1, we've identified our main color. That's the color we have the most cards of, or the best cards in, hopefully both, and we're going to stay close to that one color if possible. In packs 2 and 3, we're going to continue to take powerful cards of our main color where possible. Let the good cards we open or get past determine our secondary color and final archetype. And a note to ignore signals in pack 2 for the most part. The packs are moving in the opposite direction, so it's normal to not see the same signals as you were seeing in pack 1. So if we're seeing a lot of red in pack 1, be prepared to not see very much in pack 2. But in pack 3, because the packs are flowing the same direction as pack 1, we will see that red again. So don't deviate from your course too far in pack 2. It can lead to a lot of train wreck drafts. Some deck building tips. Play 2 colors. Only play 3 or more colors if you have mana fixing. We don't want to be running weird mana bases of like 7/7/3 or whatever. We need to have actual mana fixing to play multiple colors, so stick to 2 where possible. Play 17 lands. A deck with no cards that cost more than 4 mana can play 16 lands, although in this format, I think most decks will want 17 or more just because of disguise. Finally, we have play a low curve. We want 6 or more 2-mana creatures, about 4 3-mana creatures, some amount of 4-mana creatures, and a few 5 or more mana creatures. Keep in mind that disguise creatures count as 3-mana plays, because you can play them on turn 3. Just to give you an example, I've done a draft on Draft Sim, just to give you an idea of what a red-black deck could look like. We've got 7 2-drop creatures, which is really nice for an aggressive deck. We've got 5 3-drops, which include Concealed Weapon and Basilica Stalker, which have disguise, so I'm including them in the 3-drop slot. We've got 2 4-drops, and we've got some nice removal spells here at the bottom. We did pretty well in this draft. Shock, Galvanize, Double Torch, Deadly Complication, Case of the Burning Masks. We got a Murder even as well. So, and then we're playing 17 lands, 8 swamps, 9 mountains. So this looks like a pretty good aggressive deck. And I will note that we also drafted some really nice red-white rares here, but we're not going to include them in the deck because we did not find any mana fixing. It would be a recipe for disaster to run 7 swamps, 7 mountains, and 3 plains to try to play these. We're going to end up in a lot of games where we draw the wrong lands at the wrong time and we can't cast our spells, especially when we've got a double red here, Lamplight Phoenix, and a double black down here in Murder, another double red in Case of the Burning Mask. So be very careful about trying to splash cards. Your deck will be better if you just make it as streamlined as possible. All right, that's going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for watching. Please click like and click subscribe if you want to support the channel. It helps a huge amount. And please leave a comment if you have any questions or feedback for the channel, or just want to sort of say hello. We'd love to hear from you. Love getting feedback in the comment section. Send any feedback for the channel or inquiries about private coaching to howtodraftmtg@gmail.com. Thanks again, everybody. Have a great time drafting. Best of luck. We'll talk to you again very soon. Bye for now.